My name is Eleanor Hayes, I am 82 years old, and until recently, I thought I had raised a family that loved and respected me. I was wrong. On the night everything changed, I sat in my kitchen with an empty plate before me, trembling hands clutching a glass of water that tasted like metal. The fridge was bare except for a rotting apple and a carton of milk that had long expired. The pantry door creaked open to reveal only a half-used bag of flour. My children had stopped bringing me groceries a week ago, claiming they were tight on money. But the truth was, they were tightening the noose around my neck, hoping hunger would drive me out of the home their father built with his own hands. That evening, I heard laughter coming from outside my window. Peeking through the curtains, I saw my son David and his wife Rebecca unloading shopping bags, steaks, wine, bread, and fresh fruit, into their car. They lived 5 minutes away and had the keys to my house. Yet they left me with nothing. I realized then they weren't forgetting me. They were starving me on purpose. My stomach growled with pain, but my heart burned hotter with rage. I went to bed shivering from hunger, but my mind was awake, calculating. They thought my age made me weak, but they had no idea what strength lived inside me. My late husband John had taught me how to save, how to invest, and how to protect what was mine. Every penny in their bank accounts was tied to the trust fund I controlled. They believed I was too frail to fight back. They were wrong. The next morning, David came by, his cologne announcing his presence before he spoke. "Mom, maybe it's time you move into assisted living," he said casually while scrolling on his phone. Rebecca stood behind him, smirking like a cat that had caught a mouse. I forced a weak smile and nodded as if agreeing. "You might be right, son," I whispered. That was the last time I let them see me as helpless. That night, I opened the safe hidden behind the old wardrobe in my bedroom. Inside were documents that could change everything. The deed to my house, legal control of their business accounts, and my husband's uncashed insurance policies. I hadn't touched those papers in years, but now they felt like weapons in my hands. I called my lawyer, Mark Stevenson, and told him everything. His voice was calm but firm. "Eleanor, will starve their greed before they starve you." While my children thought they were winning, I quietly started moving funds, freezing accounts, and preparing documents they didn't even know existed. I still remember the shock on Rebecca's face when her credit card was declined at a fancy restaurant 2 days later. She came storming into my house, screaming, "What have you done?" I just smiled, sipping my tea. But this was only the beginning. They had underestimated me, and now I was about to show them what happens when you push a mother too far. The same woman they left to starve was about to drain the very accounts they depended on. What they didn't know was that I had one more surprise hidden in my purse that would destroy everything they had planned. And when I revealed it, they wouldn't just lose their money, they would lose everything. What would you do if your own children tried to starve you out of your home? Comment below where you're watching from and stay tuned, because in the next chapter, you'll see just how far they went, and how far I was willing to go to stop them. The following morning, sunlight streamed through my lace curtains, but it felt like a mocking light, shining on a house where its owner had been treated like a prisoner. My bones ached from both hunger and anger. I brewed myself a cup of black tea with the last spoon of sugar left in the jar. As the steam rose, so did the fire in my chest. I was Eleanor Hayes, and this house was my kingdom. No one, not even my own children, would force me out. I took slow sips as I stared at the picture on the wall, me and John on our wedding day. His warm eyes seemed to tell me, "You're stronger than they think." I smiled to myself. The memories of building this house together, brick by brick, filled me with determination. We had worked too hard for me to hand it over to vultures disguised as family. Around noon, I heard the rumble of a car engine outside. Through the window, I saw my daughter Claire step out, her expensive heels clicking against the pavement. She was the one I trusted the most, or so I thought. When she walked in, she looked around like she was inspecting something that didn't belong to her. "Mom, this place looks so old," she said, wrinkling her nose. "Maybe you should sell it. You could use the money to make life easier." Her words dripped with fake concern, but her eyes darted to the framed documents on the shelf. I clutched my teacup tighter. Claire, I said softly, I've lived here all my life. Why would I sell my memories? She forced a smile and hugged me, whispering, just think about it. But as she left, I saw the smirk spread across her face. She thought she was planting a seed. She didn't know I was already 3 steps ahead. That night I barely slept. My phone buzzed with a message from my lawyer, Mark. Transfer in progress. Accounts will be frozen by morning. My heart thumped like a drum. This was it. By sunrise, the money they used to dine in restaurants, shop designer brands, and live comfortably would be locked. They would feel a fraction of the hunger they forced on me. The next day, I watched from my window as David pulled into the driveway again, this time in a rage. He slammed the car door and stormed inside without knocking. Mom, what the hell is going on? He shouted, waving his phone. My accounts are frozen. I can't access a dime. Rebecca followed him, face red with anger. We know you had something to do with this, she screeched. I took a slow sip of tea. Oh, you think an old woman like me could manage something like that? I said, feigning innocence. Their jaws tightened. They were scared. But I gave you everything, I told them, my voice trembling not from fear, but from fury. I raised you, fed you, clothed you, and this is how you repay me. By trying to starve me out of my own home. The room fell silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. David's face softened for a moment, but Rebecca's didn't. She spat. You're old, Mom. You don't need this house. You don't need all that money. You should just move on. That was the moment I realized the woman my son married had poisoned his mind with greed. She saw me as an obstacle, not a mother. Fine. If they wanted a battle, I would give them one they'd never forget. Over the next few days, I worked in secret with Mark. We set up meetings, signed documents, and moved assets. My children thought I was helpless, but every call and signature put me one step closer to victory. While they fought with banks and credit card companies, I was securing my future. One evening, I walked through the halls of my home, touching the walls with my fingertips. This house had witnessed laughter, tears, and countless memories. Now it would witness a war. I stood in the living room, whispering to John's portrait. They think they can take this from me. They have no idea who they're dealing with. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I overheard a conversation that chilled my bones. Through the crack of my slightly open door, I heard David on the phone with someone. Don't worry, we'll get her out. She can't last much longer. Once she's gone, we'll sell the place. My heart pounded. They weren't just trying to push me, they were planning for my death. I stepped back, my knees almost giving way. For the first time in years, I felt tears rolling down my cheeks. Not because I was afraid, but because the children I had sacrificed everything for were plotting my downfall. But those tears soon dried, replaced by something far stronger, resolve. The next morning I called Mark again. It's time, I told him. Make sure every single penny is cut off. And prepare the papers I told you about. He didn't ask questions. He just said, consider it done. By that evening the storm had begun. David and Rebecca were screaming at each other outside my house, blaming one another for their financial troubles. Claire was frantically calling me, begging me to undo what I had done. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat calmly at my kitchen table, eating a warm bowl of soup Mark had dropped off for me. For the first time in weeks I felt full, not just in my stomach but in my spirit. But just when I thought I had the upper hand, I found something that turned my blood cold. As I was cleaning the living room, I discovered a folded piece of paper tucked under the couch cushion. It was a printed email. Rebecca's email to a real estate agent, stating they would have the house on the market by next month. My name wasn't even mentioned. They were that confident I'd be gone. I crumpled the paper in my hand, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. They were already selling my life out from under me. They believed my fate was sealed. But they forgot one thing. Eleanor Hayes doesn't just survive, she fights back. And when I unleash what I have planned next, their world will come crashing down harder than they ever imagined. What would you do if your own children plotted to take everything from you? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't miss the next chapter, because the storm that's coming will shake their lives to the core. The morning after I discovered the email, the house felt colder than usual, almost as if it was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. I sat on the porch, wrapped in my husband's old flannel jacket, staring at the horizon while the sun crept slowly into the sky. The world outside was quiet, but inside my chest a storm brewed. They were already making plans to sell my house without me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was ready for war. Mark called early. "Eleanor," he said, his voice crisp. "Everything is in place. Their accounts remain frozen. I've also drawn up the document transferring all control of your assets into a private trust only you can access. They can't touch a cent." Smiled. "Thank you, Mark. But we're not stopping there." "You have something in mind?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, glancing at John's picture on the wall. "I'm going to make them feel the weight of their betrayal, one step at a time." Later that day, Claire came over again, this time pretending to be sweet, carrying a small grocery bag with bread and canned soup. "Mom, I'm worried about you," she said with her fake smile. "Why don't you let me handle things for you? I can help manage your finances, make sure you're okay." Her tone was dripping with manipulation. I stared at her, letting her think I was falling for it. "That's kind of you, dear," I said softly. Her eyes lit up. She thought she was winning. But she didn't notice the camera Mark had installed in the living room the day before. Every word, every smirk was being recorded. That night, I replayed the footage, my hands trembling. There it was, Claire rifling through my drawers when she thought I wasn't looking, snapping pictures of my documents with her phone. Proof of her greed. Proof of her betrayal. Tears welled in my eyes again, but I wiped them away. This wasn't a time for sadness. This was a time for action. The following week, my plan began to unfold. Mark filed papers that officially revoked their access to any joint accounts we once shared. The utilities they had tied to my name, cancelled and reissued under my control. The business investments David relied on, sold off to parties they didn't know, leaving him scrambling. Rebecca's luxury shopping habits came to a crashing halt when her cards were declined again and again. Their calls flooded my phone, but I let them ring unanswered. Then came the night they decided to confront me all at once. They stormed into my house without knocking, David red with anger, Rebecca pacing like a lioness, and Claire trying to play peacemaker. "Mom, what are you doing to us?" David yelled. "You're ruining everything." Rebecca shrieked. "You're being selfish. You're old. You don't need all this money." I stood up slowly, my back straight despite my age. "Selfish," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You left me to starve. You came into my home, tried to take what's mine, and now you call me selfish." The room went silent except for Rebecca's heavy breathing. I pulled out the email I found and threw it on the table. "Explain this." Their faces turned pale. David stammered. "Mom, it's not what it looks like." "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," I snapped. "You thought I'd die quietly, didn't you? You thought you'd take this house, my money, everything your father and I worked for. But you forgot one thing. I built this life, and I'll burn it down before I let you steal it." Rebecca lunged forward, but David held her back. "You'll regret this," she hissed. I stepped closer, looking her dead in the eye. "No, dear. You will." That night, I locked every door and window, my heart pounding. I knew they weren't done. Greedy people never stop until they're destroyed, or destroyed by someone stronger. And I was ready to be that someone. The next morning, I met with Mark in his office downtown. "Are you ready for the next move?" he asked. I slid a folder across the desk. Inside were photographs, emails, and recordings of everything they'd done. "Send this to the authorities if they try anything else," I said. He nodded. "Consider it done." When I returned home, I found the gate slightly open and footprints in the mud leading to the back door. My stomach sank. I rushed inside, heart pounding, and found my kitchen ransacked. They'd broken in while I was gone. Food was thrown on the floor, Cabinets ripped open, drawers emptied. On the counter was a note, scribbled in Claire's handwriting. "This isn't over." My hands shook as I read it, but instead of fear, I felt an icy calm wash over me. They had declared war. And they had no idea what was coming for them. That night, I made a phone call to an old friend, one who owed me a favor. "It's time," I said simply. He understood. The pieces were falling into place. Soon they would regret ever underestimating Eleanor Hayes. But just as I was about to hang up, I heard something, a creak on the stairs. I wasn't alone in my house. When I turned around, a shadow moved across the hallway, and my blood ran cold. What would you do if you discovered your children were breaking into your home to destroy you? Comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Stay tuned, because in the next chapter, you'll see just how dark their plan really is, and how I turn it against them. The shadow lingered for only a moment before disappearing into the darkness. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Slowly, I reached for the wooden cane leaning against the wall. Not because I needed it to walk, but because it would make a good weapon if it came to that. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my insides. Silence. Then a soft creak. I tightened my grip on the cane, stepping carefully into the hallway. The dim light from the lamp in the living room barely illuminated the staircase, but I saw it, the silhouette of a figure slipping into the guest room. My children must have thought I was asleep. They didn't know I was ready for them. "Claire," I said sharply, my voice cutting through the silence. The figure froze. When I stepped closer, the light revealed her face, wide-eyed, caught in the act. She was holding a box from under my bed, the one with my late husband's documents. "You shouldn't be here," I said, my voice low and cold. She trembled but tried to recover. "Mom, I was just looking for something. You've been acting strange." "Don't lie to me," I snapped, snatching the box from her hands. "You came here to steal." She backed away, her lips trembling. "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I said. "Get out. Now." She hesitated, tears welling in her eyes, but I stood my ground until she turned and fled down the stairs. I listened to the front door slam shut and the sound of her car speeding away. I locked the door behind her and sat on my bed, clutching the box. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. This was the final proof I needed. They weren't just starving me. They were ready to strip me of everything, even the last memories of my husband. That night I didn't sleep. Instead I worked. I went through every paper, every account, every document, making sure everything was sealed tighter than Fort Knox. The following day I invited Mark over. "I need to change the locks, reinforce the security, and move some assets offshore," I told him. He raised an eyebrow but didn't question me. "I'll handle it," he said. While we spoke, I noticed a car parked across the street, windows tinted. I knew who it belonged to, David. Watching. Waiting. By the afternoon, the locks were changed, security cameras were added, and the house felt like a fortress. But my children weren't giving up. Around evening, Rebecca stormed up my driveway, screaming so loudly the neighbors came out to watch. "You think you can do this to us?" she yelled, pounding on my door. "We'll take what's ours." I stood at the window, watching her like one might watch a wild animal. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called the police. By the time they arrived, Rebecca was still screaming, her mascara running down her face. The officers escorted her away, but not before she spat at my window. Her rage told me everything. I had hit them where it hurt. That night, I received a call from Claire. Her voice was shaky. "Mom, please, you have to stop this. You're tearing the family apart." I almost laughed. "Me? I am tearing the family apart. Claire, you and your brother made your choice when you tried to starve me out of my home." There was silence on the other end, then a sob, and the line went dead. The following morning, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. My heart leapt into my throat. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 while rushing to the living room. The window was smashed, and a brick lay on the floor with a note tied to it. The note read, Leave now or next time it won't be just a window. I stood there, staring at the message, my anger boiling over. They had crossed the line. They thought fear would drive me out, but all it did was fuel my fire. I handed the note to the police when they arrived, but I didn't stop there. Mark filed an emergency restraining order against David and Rebecca, forbidding them from coming near my home. For the next few days, the house remained quiet, almost too quiet. I knew they were planning something. Then on the third night my cameras caught them, David and Rebecca creeping around the back trying to cut the wires. I called the police again, but this time I didn't just wait. I stood at the window with the lights off, watching as the flashing red and blue lights of the patrol car pulled up. The officers caught them in the act, dragging them away in handcuffs. Rebecca screamed and cursed, David kept his head down, and I stood there smiling, the cameras recording every second. The next morning, I visited the bank to finalize my last move. Transfer all remaining joint funds to my private account, I told the manager. By the time I walked out, their accounts were dry, their credit destroyed, and their access to my wealth completely severed. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. But peace didn't last long. As I prepared my tea in the morning, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a picture, my house taken from the street with the words, "We're not done." I tightened my grip on the phone. They were getting desperate. Desperate people are dangerous. But so was I. The war wasn't over. It was only beginning. And what I had planned next would not only end their greed, it would end their control over me forever. Would you have the courage to fight back if your own children turned against you? Comment where you're watching from and stay tuned, because in the next chapter, you'll see just how far they were willing to go, and how I turned every one of their plans into ashes. The picture of my house on my phone kept replaying in my mind all day, like a warning carved into my memory. Whoever sent it wanted me to be afraid, to tremble in my own home. But fear wasn't in my nature, not anymore. I had faced betrayal, hunger, and loneliness. Now I was facing the people I had brought into this world. My heart hurt, but my resolve had never been stronger. The sun set quickly that evening, and I sat at the kitchen table with the curtains drawn, the lights dimmed. The ticking clock on the wall echoed in the silence. As I sipped my tea, I noticed a flicker on the security camera feed on my tablet. Movement at the gate. My breath caught. The figure was too far to identify, but the way they crept toward the house told me it was no neighbor. I reached for my phone and called the police. "Someone's on my property," I whispered, my voice firm. While I waited, I turned on the porch light. The bright floodlight startled the intruder, and I saw him clearly, David. His face twisted with rage when he saw me at the window. He bolted before the police arrived, disappearing into the night like a coward. The officers took my statement and promised to patrol the area more often. But I knew it wouldn't stop him. Desperation makes people reckless. As they left, I locked the doors and sat back down, staring at John's portrait on the wall. "You'd be ashamed of them," I said softly. "But don't worry, my love. I'll protect what's ours." The next morning I called Mark. "It's time for the final stage," I told him. He hesitated. "Eleanor, are you sure? This will destroy them financially." "Good," I said coldly. "They tried to destroy me first." We spent the day signing papers and making calls. I transferred all assets to a trust they couldn't touch, sold shares they relied on for income, and even cut off their access to my late husband's inheritance. By the end of the day, their financial world was crumbling. Meanwhile, word spread fast. Neighbors started whispering about the chaos. Some came to check on me, bringing food and offering to stay with me for safety. I thanked them but refused. This was my fight, and I wasn't leaving my home. I was no victim, I was the storm. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Claire appeared at my door, eyes swollen from crying. "Mom, please," she begged. "David and Rebecca are falling apart. You've ruined them. Stop this before someone gets hurt." I stared at her, my heart torn. Part of me wanted to hug her, to forgive her. But then I remembered the email, the note, the broken window. "Claire," I said softly, "you chose their side. Now live with the consequences." She cried harder, pleading, "We just wanted to help you move on. By starving me. By stealing my home." Asked sharply. She had no answer. She left sobbing, and I watched her walk away, feeling both pain and power. Later that night, as I sat reading by the fire, the power suddenly went out. My house was plunged into darkness. My heart jumped, but I grabbed the flashlight beside me and checked the breaker box. It was fine. Which meant only one thing: someone had cut the power. My cameras were battery-backed, so I checked the feed. There they were, David and Rebecca in the yard, cutting wires and carrying tools. I called 911, my voice steady. "They're here again," I told the dispatcher. "Send someone fast." This time I didn't hide. I stepped out onto the porch, flashlight in hand, and shouted, "I see you. The police are on their way." They froze, shocked that I confronted them. "Mom, you're crazy," David yelled, stepping closer. "No," I said, my voice like steel. "I'm awake. And I'm done letting you hurt me." Rebecca sneered. "You'll regret this." But before they could come closer, the sound of sirens filled the night. They ran, vanishing into the darkness as the police arrived moments later. The officers searched the property but didn't catch them. Still, the message was clear: they weren't going to stop. The next day I made my boldest move yet. With Mark's help, I filed charges against them for harassment, attempted break-in, and elder abuse. When the police served them the papers, the entire neighborhood watched. Rebecca screamed, David threatened to sue, but it didn't matter. The law was now on my side. As the days passed, the tension only grew. I kept my guard up, cameras rolling, doors locked. But something in me had changed. I was no longer afraid. I was ready. Ready for whatever came next. And then it came. Late one evening, as the rain poured down, I heard a knock on my door. Not banging, not pounding. A slow, deliberate knock. My heart raced as I approached. Through the peephole I saw a hooded figure. When I opened the door just an inch, a voice whispered, "You don't know what's coming." And before I could react, the figure slipped something under the door and vanished into the storm. When I picked it up, my hands trembled. It was an envelope. Inside was a single photograph, me sleeping in my bed, taken from inside my house. What would you do if you found a picture of yourself sleeping, left by the very people who want you gone? Comment below where you're watching from, and don't miss the next chapter, because what happens next will change everything. The photograph shook me to my core. I stared at it for minutes, my heart pounding so hard it drowned out the rain beating against the windows. The fact that someone had been inside my bedroom while I slept made my stomach twist with dread. It wasn't just a threat anymore, it was a warning. They had crossed a line that could not be undone. My first instinct was to call the police, and I did. When the officers arrived, I handed them the photo with trembling hands. They looked at it, exchanged glances, and one of them muttered, "This isn't just harassment anymore. This is criminal trespassing." They promised to increase patrols around my home and advised me to stay somewhere else for the night. I shook my head. No. This is my home, and I'm not running from my own children. After they left, I bolted every door and window, checked every camera feed, and sat awake in my armchair, a blanket draped over my shoulders, staring into the dark. The house was silent except for the creak of the wooden floors as the storm outside rattled the windows. My cane rested beside me, and in my lap I held my phone, ready to dial 911 if I had to. Somewhere deep down, beneath the fear, was a burning rage. They had violated my sanctuary, the very place where their father and I had built our lives together. They wanted to scare me into leaving, but they didn't realize their threats only made me stronger. I whispered to John's picture on the mantel, "They've made this personal. And now they'll pay." The next morning, Mark came by with an envelope of his own. "Eleanor," he said, handing it to me, "these are the papers finalizing the transfer of your assets. From this point on, you control everything directly, and they have no legal claim to a single dime." I felt relief wash over me, but I also knew the war was far from over. Thank you, Mark. But I'm not stopping here. They need to learn that betrayal has consequences. Over the next few days, I tightened my defenses. New locks, reinforced doors, additional cameras, even motion-activated lights. I also hired a private investigator, Paul, to monitor my children's activities. Within 48 hours, he brought me photos. David meeting with a man I didn't recognize, Rebecca arguing with a real estate agent, Claire crying in her car after leaving the bank. They were desperate. They were plotting something big. That night, I overheard voices outside my window. I crept silently to the curtains and peeked through. David and Rebecca were standing near the fence, whispering furiously. I couldn't hear much, but I caught fragments. Tonight, she'll have no choice, burn it all. My breath caught. Burn it all. Did they mean my house? I stepped back from the window, my heart pounding. I called the police again, but by the time they arrived, David and Rebecca were gone. The officers searched the property but found nothing. "Be careful, ma'am," one of them said. "They sound dangerous." I nodded, clutching the cane in my hand like a weapon. That night, sleep was impossible. I sat in the living room with all the lights off, watching the camera feeds on my tablet. Hours passed. Then, just past midnight, I saw movement on the screen. 2 figures creeping toward the back porch, carrying something. Gasoline cans. My heart leapt into my throat. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911 and whispered, "They're here. They're trying to burn my house." The operator kept me on the line as I watched them pour gasoline near the steps. My hands trembled, but I stayed quiet. The flashing lights of the police cars arrived just in time. The officers jumped out, guns drawn, shouting commands. David and Rebecca froze, then tried to run, but they were tackled to the ground and handcuffed. I stood at the window, tears streaming down my face, not from sadness, but from a mix of relief and heartbreak. My own son trying to burn me alive in my home. As they were dragged to the squad car, Rebecca screamed, "This isn't over. You'll regret this." I whispered to myself, "No, Rebecca. You will." After the police left, I sat in my kitchen, my hands still trembling. I brewed a cup of tea to steady my nerves, but as I took a sip, I noticed something odd. The taste was bitter, metallic. I spat it out immediately, my heart racing. I checked the sugar bowl, the milk, the teapot. Everything looked normal, but I didn't trust it. I called Paul, asking him to test the tea for anything suspicious. The next morning, Paul returned with the results. "Eleanor," he said gravely, "there were traces of a mild poison in your tea. Not enough to kill you immediately, but enough to make you weak over time." My knees nearly gave out. They had been poisoning me. The hunger, the fatigue, the strange taste. I thought it was stress. It was them. Paul looked me in the eyes and said, "You need to press charges. They crossed every line imaginable." I nodded, gripping the table to steady myself. "Oh, I will. And they won't see what's coming next." By the afternoon, Mark had filed criminal charges against David and Rebecca for attempted murder and arson. The restraining order was now ironclad, and the court froze any assets in their names that were tied to me. They were not just broke, they were about to be behind bars. But then, as I sat in my living room that evening, the phone rang. I answered cautiously. A deep voice said, "You think you've won, old lady? You have no idea who you're dealing with." Then the line went dead. I sat frozen, my heart pounding. That wasn't David's voice. That wasn't Rebecca. Someone else was involved. And whoever it was, they were coming for me next. What would you do if you found out your own children poisoned you and brought someone even more dangerous into the picture? Comment below where you're watching from, and don't miss the next chapter. Because the true enemy has just revealed themselves, and the battle is about to reach its breaking point. The voice on the phone haunted me all night. It was deep, cold, and full of threat. Someone who wasn't afraid of the law, someone who wasn't my child. I sat by the fire, clutching my cane, my eyes fixed on the shadows creeping along the walls. Whoever this new player was, they were dangerous. I barely slept, my mind racing with questions. Who were they? Why were they involved? And how far were they willing to go? By dawn I called Paul, my private investigator. "Paul, there's someone else," I told him. "They called me last night. It wasn't David, and it wasn't Rebecca." He didn't sound surprised. "Eleanor, I've been digging. David has been meeting with a man named Victor Kane. He's no stranger to trouble. Ex-con debt collector and known for doing dirty work. If David owes him money, or promised him something in exchange for getting the house, you're in real danger." My stomach churned. So he's not just after me for greed. There's more at play. "Yes," Paul replied grimly. "Victor is the kind of man who doesn't stop until he gets what he wants, or until someone stops him first." That same morning I watched the news. To my shock, the anchors were reporting on the arrest of David and Rebecca for attempted arson and elder abuse. Their faces flashed on the screen, pale and angry. The story spread fast, and the whole town was buzzing. Neighbors who once whispered now looked at me with sympathy and admiration. Some even offered to stay with me for protection. But I knew this fight was mine. The police assured me David and Rebecca were behind bars for now, but I didn't feel safe. I installed even more cameras, reinforced the back door, and kept my phone within reach at all times. Still, the thought of Victor Kane lurking out there, waiting for the right moment, kept my nerves on edge. Later that day, Claire showed up again, this time alone. Her eyes were red from crying. "Mom, please," she said, falling to her knees. I had no idea they would go this far. I didn't know about Victor. I studied her face carefully. "Claire, are you telling me the truth? Or are you just trying to save yourself?" She sobbed. "I swear I didn't know. David borrowed money from him months ago, and he promised Victor he'd get the house to pay it back. Mom, Victor is dangerous. You have to leave." My voice hardened. "Leave? After everything they've done, after they tried to starve me, poison me, burn me? No, Claire. I'm not running. They can come, but they'll regret it." I sent her away, but her warning echoed in my mind. That night, I barely moved from my chair, eyes glued to the camera feeds. Around midnight I saw it, headlights cutting through the darkness, stopping just short of my driveway. A man stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long coat. Even through the screen, I felt the menace radiating off him. Victor Kane. He walked slowly to the gate, his posture calm, almost casual. He looked directly into the camera and smiled, a cold, wicked smile, before turning back to his car and driving off. It was a message: "I see you. I can reach you any time I want." The next morning I met with Mark. "He came last night," I told him. "He's not hiding. He wants me to be afraid." Mark's jaw tightened. "We'll get a protective order. And I'll make sure the police know this man is a threat." But deep down, I knew the law alone wouldn't stop Victor. Men like him don't fear courts. They fear power. And I had plenty of that left. Paul called later with more news. "Eleanor, I followed Victor. He's been meeting with shady men around town. I think he's planning something big, maybe to force you out before the trial." I took a deep breath. "Then we strike first." That evening I invited Claire back, this time to test her loyalty. "If you truly want to make this right," I told her, "you'll help me." I handed her a small device. An audio recorder. "You're going to meet with David in jail. Get him to talk about Victor, about everything. We need evidence." She hesitated but nodded. "I'll do it." The next day, she came back with the recorder, tears streaming down her face. "He admitted everything," she whispered. "Victor is expecting the house. David told him you wouldn't last another month. He said Victor might make sure of it." The recording was clear. David's voice, calm and cold, confessing to everything. I handed it to Paul and Mark, who both agreed. It was enough to bury David and Rebecca legally, and it tied Victor to their plan. But Victor wasn't going to wait for a courtroom. That night, as I walked through my house, checking each window and door, I felt it, a presence. The hairs on my neck stood up. The cameras showed nothing, but my instincts screamed danger. I grabbed my cane and phone, moving quietly through the halls. Then I heard it. A whisper. Not outside. Inside. Eleanor. The voice was low, mocking. I spun around, my heart thundering. From the shadows near the kitchen, Victor stepped forward. His cold smile chilling me to the bone. "You're tougher than I thought," he said, his voice smooth and menacing. "But everyone breaks eventually." "You picked the wrong old woman," I said, my grip on the cane tightening. He laughed softly. "We'll see." Suddenly, headlights swept across the room as a car pulled into the driveway. The sound of sirens filled the night. Victor's smile faded. "Looks like you called for backup," he growled, slipping back into the darkness. By the time the police burst in, he was gone. I stood there trembling, clutching my cane, my heart racing. The officers searched the house but found nothing. "He's playing with you," one of them said. "Be careful." As they left, I locked the door, my hands shaking. Victor Kane had been inside my home. He had stood in my kitchen, staring at me like a predator. And I knew the next time he came, he wouldn't leave without blood. What would you do if a dangerous man was hunting you in your own home? Comment below where you're watching from, and stay tuned. Because in the next chapter, the trap I set for Victor will turn the hunter into the hunted, and my children will watch as everything they built on lies crumbles to dust. The night Victor stepped into my kitchen, I realized I wasn't just dealing with greedy children anymore. I was fighting a predator who believed he owned me. My age, my frailty. He thought these were weaknesses, but they were my camouflage. He didn't know Eleanor Hayes still had fire in her veins. The next morning, as I drank my tea in the sunlight that streamed through the window, my hands stopped trembling. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was furious. My children had unleashed this man into my life, and now I had to finish what they started. Called Mark first. "We need to set a trap," I said. His tone was calm, but I could tell he was alarmed. "Eleanor, this man is dangerous. What are you planning?" "I'm not planning," I replied, my voice like steel. "I'm acting." Mark reluctantly agreed to help. He arranged for a meeting with the local police chief, who listened to everything I told him. About the threats, the photo, Victor's visit to my house. The chief nodded gravely. "We'll set up undercover surveillance," he said. "But you need to stay somewhere safe." I shook my head. "No, this is my home. If he wants to come for me, he'll find me here. And he'll regret it." Over the next 2 days I prepared. Cameras were hidden in places even Victor wouldn't expect. Motion sensors were installed inside and out. Paul, my private investigator, stayed nearby in an unmarked car. And most importantly, I moved certain documents. Papers proving not only my ownership of everything but also evidence linking David, Rebecca, and Victor in a web of crime. Those papers would be my weapon. Then, something unexpected happened. Claire returned, pale and shaking. "Mom," she said, barely holding herself together. "Victor came to me. He said if I don't convince you to hand over the house, he'll hurt me." My blood ran cold, but I stayed calm. I held her hands and said, "Don't worry, sweetheart. He's the one who's going to be hurt." I gave her a small microphone to wear under her clothes. "You're going to meet him again. You'll tell him exactly what he wants to hear. And you'll record everything." That evening, Claire met Victor at a cafe under the watchful eye of Paul, who sat 2 tables away. I listened to the audio feed in real time through an earpiece. Victor's voice was smooth, almost charming, but dripping with malice. "Tell your mother if she doesn't hand over the deed by tomorrow, she won't live to see the next day." Claire's voice trembled. "She'll do it. She just needs more time." Victor chuckled. "Good. Because time is the only thing keeping her alive." The police got their evidence. The threats, the intimidation, it was all on record. But we didn't move yet. I wanted him to think he was still in control. The next night the trap was set. I sat in my living room, the lights dim, pretending to be reading. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak of the wood. Hidden officers were stationed outside. Paul was in his car, and Mark was on standby with the documents. My cameras were rolling. I waited. It didn't take long. Just past midnight, the back door creaked open. My heart raced, but I stayed still, cane in hand. Victor stepped inside, moving like a shadow. "Eleanor," he whispered, his voice low and taunting. "Time's up." "I was wondering when you'd show up," I said calmly, turning to face him. He froze, clearly surprised I wasn't afraid. "You think you're brave," he sneered, stepping closer. "No," I said. "I think you're sloppy." I tapped my cane twice on the floor, a signal to the officers outside. Within seconds, lights blazed, and armed police stormed in. Victor spun around, but it was too late. He was tackled to the ground, handcuffed, and dragged out of my house, cursing and shouting. As they led him away, I stepped to the porch. "You picked the wrong grandmother," I called out. His eyes burned with hatred, but he said nothing as the police car drove off into the night. But the war wasn't over. The next morning I got a call from Mark. "Eleanor, we have a problem. David posted bail. He's out." My stomach dropped. Even after everything, he was still coming. "And Rebecca?" "Yes. She's out too," Mark said grimly. "They're desperate. They're going to make one last move." I spent the day strengthening the house even further, preparing for whatever they had planned. Claire stayed with me, terrified but determined to help. "Mom, what if they try something worse?" she asked. "They will," I said softly. "But this time I'll be ready." That night, I sat by the window, staring out into the darkness. The house was quiet, but my heart was beating faster with every minute that passed. I knew they were coming. I could feel it. Then, just past midnight, the security alarm blared. I rushed to the monitor and saw them. David and Rebecca, armed with crowbars, smashing through the fence. The police had been called automatically, but I knew I had only minutes. I grabbed my phone and called Mark. "It's happening," I said. "Send everything." David's voice roared outside. "You think you won? This house is ours." Rebecca screamed. "You'll regret this." The door rattled under their blows. I backed away, clutching my cane, my heart pounding. As they crashed through the door, sirens wailed in the distance. David charged toward me, but before he could reach me, the police burst in, guns drawn. They were dragged out kicking and screaming as neighbors gathered to watch. The once proud son was now a criminal, his wife crying hysterically. But as they were shoved into the police car, David turned to me and spat. "This isn't over, Mom. You'll pay for this." I stood there, staring at the flashing lights as the cars drove away. My heart was heavy. My children were gone, but the battle wasn't finished. I still had to destroy the last of their power and ensure they could never touch me, or this house, again. Because what I was about to reveal next would not only strip them of their freedom but erase their claim to my life forever. Would you stand strong if the people you loved turned into monsters? Comment below where you're watching from, and don't miss the next chapter, because the final evidence I'm about to unleash will shatter everything they ever thought they controlled. The night they dragged David and Rebecca away felt like the beginning of the end, but I knew better. People like them, greedy, desperate, don't surrender. They plot. They wait. They lash out like cornered animals. As I stood by the window, watching the police cars fade into the darkness, I felt both victorious and vulnerable. I had won the battle, but the war wasn't over. The following morning, I sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea that Paul himself had prepared to ensure it was safe. Claire sat across from me, her hands trembling as she clutched her mug. "Mom," she whispered, "they're not going to stop. Even if they're locked up, they'll find a way to hurt you." I reached across the table, taking her hand. "That's why we're ending this, Claire. Not just stopping them, we're erasing their hold on me once and for all." Mark arrived soon after, carrying a thick folder. He set it on the table, opening it to reveal document after document. Property deeds, bank statements, business transfers, trust declarations. "Eleanor, with this," he said, "you will legally sever any connection between your children and your estate." Once we file this, they'll have nothing. No claim, no inheritance, no power. I stared at the papers, my fingers brushing over the signatures. Do it, I said firmly. And make sure they know I was the one who signed it. Mark nodded. It'll be done by this evening. That day, word spread quickly that my children were facing not only criminal charges but also financial ruin. The news covered the story again, this time detailing their failed attempts to steal from their own mother and the dangerous man they had hired. Neighbors who once whispered behind closed doors now openly condemned them. It was as if the entire town had turned its back on them. While I waited for the final filings to go through, I sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames. My heart ached for the children I once knew, the little boy who used to bring me flowers, the little girl who used to hold my hand at night. Somewhere along the way, they had turned into strangers. John, I whispered to my late husband's picture, I'm sorry it came to this, but I'll protect what we built, even if it means losing them forever. That evening, Mark returned with confirmation. It's done, he said. The house, the assets, everything is now in a trust that only you control. They can't touch a cent, not even through court. Relief washed over me, but it was bittersweet. My children were now completely cut off, not just financially but emotionally. There was no going back. Just as I exhaled, my phone buzzed. Text message. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. The message read, You think you've won, but blood is thicker than paper. We're coming tonight. My heart raced. I showed it to Mark, who immediately called the police. We'll have officers stationed outside all night, he assured me. But I had a sinking feeling. This wasn't an empty threat. This was their final strike. Night fell quickly, the sky outside swallowing the last bit of sunlight. The house was quiet, too quiet. Claire stayed with me, sitting nervously on the couch. The officers were parked outside, their silhouettes visible in the patrol cars. I had cameras, alarms, everything. Still, my pulse thudded in my ears. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Just as I began to think maybe they wouldn't come, the power went out. The house was plunged into darkness. Claire screamed. The alarms switched to backup batteries, but the sudden silence was deafening. My phone buzzed again. Another message, Lights out, Mom. Before I could react, the sound of breaking glass shattered the night. They were here. Stay behind me, I told Claire, gripping my cane like a weapon. The door burst open and David stumbled in, his face twisted with rage. Rebecca followed, her hair wild, eyes burning with madness. You ruined our lives, David shouted, stepping closer. You ruined your own lives, I said, my voice calm despite the fear. And now you'll face the consequences. Rebecca lunged at me, but I swung the cane hard, striking her arm. She screamed, dropping the crowbar she had been holding. Claire shrieked, running toward the officers outside. In seconds, the house filled with flashing lights as police stormed in. David tried to fight, but he was tackled to the ground, handcuffed while cursing. Rebecca was dragged out, sobbing and screaming. As they were shoved into the police car, David glared at me with pure hatred. You're dead to us, he spat. I stepped onto the porch, standing tall under the flashing lights. You made me dead to you the moment you tried to kill me, I said coldly. The police chief approached. They're going away for a long time, Eleanor. You're safe now. I nodded, but I knew safety wasn't just about the law. It was about knowing I had fought back and won. But as I turned to go back inside, Paul handed me something, an envelope he found on David. Inside was a single photo, me standing at the window, taken from the street just hours before. On the back were the words, "This isn't over. Someone else wants what's yours." My blood ran cold. Someone else. Ooh. And at that moment, I realized the storm wasn't over yet. Someone far more dangerous was waiting in the shadows. What would you do if you found out a greater threat was still out there, even after your children were taken away? Comment below where you're watching from, and don't miss the final chapter. Because in the end, the truth will shake everything to its core, and my last move will leave them with nothing but regret. After the police cars drove away, taking David and Rebecca with them for the last time, silence settled over my house like an unwelcome guest. The flashing lights faded, leaving only the soft glow of my porch light against the night. My hands were steady now. I wasn't shaking anymore. The fight with my children was over. But that photo, the one Paul had found on David, told me the war was far from done. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photo under the lamplight. Someone else wanted what was mine. The words on the back burned into my mind. Someone else wants what's yours. Who could it be? Victor was in prison. David and Rebecca were facing years behind bars. Claire was by my side. Yet someone else was out there lurking. The next morning, Paul came to my house, his face grim. "Eleanor, I've been digging. There's another player, a man named Harold Bishop. He's a developer who's been eyeing properties in this area, and he's been in contact with Victor before his arrest." "So he's the one pulling the strings now," I said. Paul nodded. "He's been buying houses cheap, forcing elderly homeowners out, and flipping the land for profit. Your kids promised him your house. With Victor gone, he might come after you himself." I took a deep breath, the fire in my chest rising again. "Then we make sure he never gets close." That afternoon I met with Mark and laid everything out. "File whatever you need to lock down this property so tight not even a shadow can touch it. And while you're at it, make sure this Harold Bishop knows exactly who he's dealing with." Mark smiled faintly. "Consider it done, Eleanor. By the time I'm finished, this house will be untouchable." Over the next few days I moved with quiet precision. Mark filed paperwork that made my trust bulletproof. Paul kept an eye on Bishop's movements, trailing him to meetings and photographing his shady deals. We built a case against him, one that would not only protect me but expose him for the predator he was. Still, I didn't let my guard down. Every night I checked the cameras, bolted the doors, and kept my cane within reach. Then 2 nights later my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You can't hide behind papers forever, old woman. I'll take what's mine." My lips curled into a cold smile. Let him try. The following evening, under a blood-red sunset, headlights approached my driveway. A sleek black car rolled up slowly, stopping just outside the gate. A man stepped out, tall, well-dressed, with a smug smile. Harold Bishop. He didn't try to hide who he was. He walked up to my gate like he owned it. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, his voice dripping with false charm. "We haven't met, but I think we can help each other. Sell me your house. You'll get a generous payout, and I'll take care of everything else." I stood on the porch, my arms crossed. "Not for sale." He chuckled. "Everyone has a price." I stared him down. "Not me." His smile faded. "You're making a mistake. Have connections. I can make your life very difficult." I stepped closer, the porch light illuminating my face. "You think I'm afraid of you? I've faced worse than you. Try me." He glared at me for a moment, then smirked. "You'll regret this." He turned and walked back to his car. But as he drove off, I knew he wasn't giving up. The next morning, Paul showed me photos. Bishop meeting with 2 men in an alley, exchanging envelopes. "He's planning something," Paul said. "We need to act now." He nodded. "Let's finish this." Mark filed an injunction against Bishop, citing harassment and illegal attempts to coerce property transfers. Meanwhile, Paul handed the evidence to a journalist friend, who published an explosive story exposing Bishop's illegal dealings. Within hours, his name was plastered all over the news, his face associated with scandal and corruption. That evening, as I sat on my porch sipping tea, a car screeched to a halt at the curb. Bishop stormed out, his face red with rage. "You ruined me," he screamed. "You think this is over?" I stood slowly, leaning on my cane, my voice calm but sharp. "You're finished. Get off my property." He stepped closer, but before he could say another word, police cars swarmed the street. Officers jumped out, guns drawn. "Harold Bishop, you're under arrest," one of them shouted. Paul had tipped them off. They handcuffed him as he screamed curses at me. I watched him being taken away, a quiet satisfaction settling over me. When the street finally fell silent again, I sat back down, tears welling in my eyes. Not tears of fear or sadness, tears of victory. I had fought them all. My greedy children, a dangerous criminal, and a corrupt developer. And I had won. The next day, Mark came with the final papers. "Eleanor, your home is safe. Forever. No one can touch it now. You've done it." I smiled faintly, my heart swelling with pride. "No, Mark. We did it." Claire hugged me tightly, whispering, "Mom, you're the strongest woman I've ever known." I held her close, forgiving her silently for the part she played. She had redeemed herself. As the sun set over my home, casting golden light across the porch, I whispered to John's picture one last time. "We protected what's ours. We won." To my children I left nothing. To the predators who tried to take what wasn't theirs, I left only destruction. And to myself I kept my dignity, my home, and my peace. My story is proof that age is not weakness. It's power. It's wisdom. It's survival. And to those who dare to come for me again, remember this. Eleanor Hayes doesn't break. She makes others bend. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Because stories like mine are reminders that no matter your age, you can fight back and you can win.